My girlfriend looked at me and said, "If you can't handle me going out with him, then maybe this isn't working." I didn't say anything back. I replied, "Your choice." Then I put the phone down and went back to my laptop. 3 days later, she was calling every hour. How one message triggered everything she never saw coming. I was 31 years old, senior software architect at a mid-sized firm. I had spent 4 years building something with a woman named Priya, 4 years of dinners I paid for, vacations I planned, problems I quietly solved while she moved through the world believing it moved on its own. I wasn't resentful. I genuinely loved her. But I had confused love with invisibility. I had made myself so reliable, so present, so quietly competent, that she stopped registering me as a variable. I told myself that was what a good partner did. Removed friction, absorbed pressure, made things easy. I was wrong. I had not made things easy. I had made myself forgettable. The man she wanted to go out with was named Dev. I had heard his name 3 times in 6 months. Once at a dinner party where she laughed at something he said louder than I had ever heard her laugh with me. Once in a text notification I wasn't supposed to see, where he called her the only person worth talking to at that company. And once from her own mouth, casually, like she was mentioning a coffee order, when she said he had been going through something and she wanted to be there for him. I said nothing each time, not because I was afraid, because I was watching. There is a difference between silence that is passive and silence that is collecting information. Mine was the second kind. What I knew about Dev and what Priya did not know that I knew was that Dev worked at the same company as both of us, not in my department, in the product division. I had never told Priya that Dev had applied for a senior role in my department 8 months earlier. I had never told her that I had sat on the interview panel. I had never told her that the panel had unanimously decided not to move forward with him, not because of anything malicious, but because his technical assessment had revealed significant gaps that the role required. I had said nothing about this because at the time it was irrelevant. I was professional. I kept work conversations out of my personal life. But I had filed the information, the way you file things you don't need yet. The night she said those words to me, we were standing in the kitchen. I had just come home from a 12-hour day. I had a glass of water in my hand. She had her phone in hers, and she was already dressed, not for a dinner with a girlfriend, not for a work function, but in the way women dress when they want to be noticed. I asked a simple question. "Where are you going?" She told me. "Dev's place." "A small group of people," she said. "Casual." I asked a second simple question. "Is it just him?" She paused. That pause told me everything. Then she said it. "If you can't handle me going out with him, then maybe this isn't working." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't feel anger the way people describe it. Hot, rising, loud. I felt something much quieter. A kind of clarity, like a room you've been walking through in the dark and someone finally turns on the light. Not to show you something beautiful, but to show you how long you've been bumping into furniture. I replied, "Your choice." I put the glass down on the counter. I went to the bedroom, closed the door without a sound, and sat at my desk. She waited, I think, for me to come back out. To argue. To chase. I opened my laptop and finished a code review I had been putting off for 2 days. She left 40 minutes later. I heard the door. That night, I made 4 decisions. Not in anger. In arithmetic. The first decision was about the apartment. We had been living together for 14 months. The lease was in my name. I had always kept it that way, not as strategy, not as control, but because I handled those things. I handled most things. The lease renewal was coming up in 60 days. I pulled up the landlord's contact and drafted an email letting him know I would be renewing as a single occupant. I didn't send it that night. I scheduled it to send in 7 days. That gave me a week to be wrong. I wasn't wrong. The second decision was about the joint account. We weren't married, but we had opened a shared account 18 months earlier for household expenses, groceries, utilities, the streaming services, the gym membership she used twice and I used every morning. My contribution to that account was 4 times hers. Not because we agreed to that ratio, because I had quietly, gradually, assumed the financial weight of our shared life the way I assumed most weight, without announcement, without negotiation, without anyone ever noticing it was happening. I logged into the banking app and scheduled a transfer. My contribution would end on the 1st of the following month. The third decision was about her car. 8 months earlier, Her car had broken down on a Tuesday night. And rather than deal with the back and forth of financing, I had added her to my insurance policy and helped her take out a small personal loan for repairs through my credit union. Because I had a relationship with that credit union, because my credit score was 791, and because it was simply easier, she made payments. But I was the co-signer, and the insurance was bundled into mine. I contacted my insurance provider that night and began the separation process. It would take 30 days to process. I made a note. The fourth decision was the smallest and the most important. It had nothing to do with Priya. It had to do with Dev. I opened my work email. I pulled up the internal hiring system. Dev had, it turned out, reapplied for a senior position, not in my department this time, but in an adjacent team that needed a technical sign-off from engineering leadership before extending an offer. I was engineering leadership. The request had been sitting in my queue for 11 days while I had been absorbed in a product launch. I read his application again, carefully, fully. Then I closed the laptop and went to sleep. I had not made a decision about Dev yet. I had simply read the file. That is all. She came home at 1:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when I heard the door, not out of anxiety, but out of habit. She was quiet coming in. She may have expected a fight. There was none. I was already asleep again before she reached the bedroom. The next morning, I was up at 5:45. I made coffee. I went to the gym. I came back. She was still asleep. I showered, dressed, and went to work. I did not leave a note. I did not text her good morning the way I had every single day for 2 years and 4 months. I had set a recurring morning message at some point in the first year. A small, affectionate habit. I deleted that automation the night before. She would not receive a message. She would notice its absence before she noticed anything else. That is always how it works. People do not notice the presence of reliability. They only notice its withdrawal. By 11 in the morning, she texted me, "You're being weird." I read it. I didn't reply. By 1 in the afternoon, she texted again. "Are you seriously still on this?" I read it. I put my phone face down. By 4:30, she called. I let it ring. At 5 in the evening, I replied to Dev's hiring request. I wrote a detailed, professional, completely honest technical assessment. I noted the gaps I had observed in his previous interview. I noted that those gaps appeared unresolved. Based on his current application materials, I recommended the team conduct a full technical assessment before moving to offer stage. The same process applied to every candidate at that level. I copied the hiring manager and the head of people operations. I sent it. I closed the laptop. Let me be completely precise about what I did and did not do. I did not block Dev's application. I did not fabricate concerns. I did not use my position to retaliate. I applied the exact same professional standard I would have applied to any candidate on any other day. The irony was not something I manufactured. The irony was simply the situation, undistorted. Dev had been spending time with my girlfriend while simultaneously needing a technical sign-off from me to advance his career. I had not created that conflict. He had, and I had resolved it the only way a professional with integrity could, by doing my job accurately, without favoritism in either direction. 3 days after she went to his place, Dev did not get the role. He received a standard rejection with a recommendation for further skill development. I know this because the hiring manager replied to my email to confirm. I did not share this information with Priya. I didn't need to. I simply went back to my work. She was calling every hour by the end of that week. The next 7 days proceeded with a predictability that would have felt cinematic if it weren't so plainly mechanical. Day 2. She was warmer in the morning. Try to make conversation over coffee. I answered politely, briefly. I did not reciprocate with extra warmth. I was not cold. I was calibrated. Day 3. She texted. Dev from what she thought was a private location, the bathroom, door closed. I was not spying. I could hear the phone keyboard clicking in the rapid pattern of someone typing an emotional paragraph, not a casual message. I noted it. I had no interest in the content. The behavior was enough. Day 4. She asked me directly if I was planning to break up with her. I told her I thought we should have an honest conversation about the structure of our relationship. She took that as an invitation to explain that Dev was just a friend and that I was being insecure. I did not argue the point. I said, that may be true. She waited for me to say more. I didn't. Day 5, she called her sister. I could hear the conversation from the other room, in pieces. Her sister said something that changed her tone. After the call, Priya was quieter, more watchful, less certain. Day 6. She went through the shared account statement on her laptop at the kitchen table. I saw her stop scrolling. Saw her look up at me. I was reading a book. I didn't look up. Day 7. I sent the email to the landlord. 2 weeks after the night in the kitchen, I sat down with her and told her, clearly and without ceremony, that I would be transitioning the apartment to a single lease and that she would need to make arrangements for her living situation within 60 days. I told her the joint account contributions would end on the first of the following month. I told her the car insurance situation would need to be resolved, that she had 30 days to move her vehicle onto her own policy, and that I would be removing myself as co-signer on the loan at the next available window. She cried. Not immediately. First she argued. Then she tried to reframe. I never asked you to do any of that. That was the moment. That single line. The moment that revealed everything she had never examined about us. She had never asked me to do any of it. She had simply allowed it. She had accepted the apartment, the account, the car insurance, the vacations, the quiet competence, the invisible labor of a man making her life structurally easier every single day, without once pausing to ask where it came from or what it cost. She had taken the architecture of our life together for granted, the way you take for granted the load-bearing walls of a building you've been living in comfortably for years. She had never once asked, what happens if this wall is removed? Now she was finding out. She called a mutual friend, a woman named Seema, who I liked, respected, and knew would take Priya's side without full information, because that is what friends do. Seema called me 3 days later. I took the call. I listened. I said very little. At one point, Seema said, "Don't you think you're being a bit extreme?" I said, "Seema, I appreciate you calling. I'm not going to discuss the details of a private relationship with a third party. If Priya wants to talk, she knows how to reach me." Seema said, "She says you've completely shut down." I said, "I've made some practical decisions. That's different from shutting down." Then Seema said something I had not expected. She said, she's also really confused about Dev. Apparently, he's upset about some job thing. She doesn't understand what's going on. I said, "I'm not sure what that has to do with me." Seema was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very carefully, "Was that connected to you?" I said, "I did my job." And I ended the call. That was the week Priya finally started to understand what she had been standing next to for 4 years. Not a man who would absorb whatever she required. A man who had been absorbing it by choice, and who had quietly, cleanly, and permanently stopped choosing. Priya's next move was a long email, 7 paragraphs covering her childhood, her past relationships, her fear of abandonment, how my sudden coldness was re-traumatizing her, and a line near the end that said, "You of all people should know what it's like to feel alone." I read the email twice. I wrote back 3 sentences. I said I had received her message. I said I wished her well. I said the practical timeline I had outlined remained unchanged, and that if she had logistical questions about the transition, she could reach me by email. She showed up at my office on a Thursday. I was in a glass-walled meeting room when she arrived at the front desk. My colleague Elena came to get me with an expression that told me something uncomfortable was happening. I excused myself from the meeting, walked to the lobby. Priya was standing near the reception desk in the same coat she had been wearing the night of the kitchen conversation. She looked tired. She looked like she had been preparing something to say for days. She said, "I just need 5 minutes." I said, "This isn't the place for this." She said, "You won't answer my calls." I said, "I've responded to every email within 24 hours." She looked at me for a long moment. The receptionist was pretending to look at her computer. 2 colleagues had slowed their walk past the glass wall. Priya said quietly, "Did you have something to do with Dev not getting that job?" I said, "I did my job." She said, "That's not an answer." I said, "It's the only one I have." She stood there for 3 seconds. Something moved across her face that I cannot fully describe. Not anger, not grief exactly, but a kind of recognition. The recognition of a person who has just understood the full geometry of a situation for the first time. She had thought she was navigating a jealous boyfriend. She had not understood that she was navigating a man who played long, played clean, and played to completion. She had not understood that the same calmness she had mistaken for passivity was the very quality that made him dangerous to underestimate. She left without another word. She didn't cry in the lobby. I'll give her that. She walked out with her coat pulled around her, and she didn't look back. That was the moment she understood. Not dramatically, not cinematically. She understood in the specific, quiet, unglamorous way you understand something you've been avoiding. Not because someone explains it to you, but because you run out of moves and the silence that remains has no comfortable interpretation. She had assumed my patience was infinite. She had assumed my stability was ambient, background, structural, inevitable, like air conditioning in a building you've never had to maintain. She had not understood that stable men have thresholds, and that a man who reaches his threshold without raising his voice, without sending an angry text, without making a scene, that man is not reacting. He is concluding. The 60 days passed. She moved in with a girlfriend from work. The car insurance separated cleanly. She was frustrated about the loan refinancing. It cost her a higher interest rate. Because her credit profile was thinner than mine, she sent one last message about it. I replied with the name and direct line of my credit union contact who could walk her through the process. Professional. Final. Done. There was one last message, sent at 11:17 on a Tuesday night, 2 months after she had moved out. It said, simply, I think I finally understand what I had. I read it. I did not reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because there was nothing left to say that would serve either of us. Some understandings arrive in time to be useful. Some arrive as epilogues. This one was an epilogue. I put the phone face down and went back to sleep. What the apartment felt like without her was not what I had expected. I had expected grief, or at least a hollow version of it. What I found instead was space. Actual, physical, tangible space. Space in the closet. Space on the bathroom counter. Space in the morning where I used to navigate around another person's schedule, another person's mood, another person's needs that I had silently organized my day around. I went to sleep without the low-grade vigilance of monitoring someone else's emotional temperature. I worked late when work required it without manufacturing an explanation. My apartment was quiet. My apartment was mine. I am not describing victory. Victory implies a competition. There was no competition. There was a relationship that operated on an incorrect assumption that I would absorb whatever it required indefinitely, that my reliability was not a choice but a feature, that my silence was weakness and not calculation. That assumption was tested. It was found to be incorrect. The relationship ended not because of a fight, not because of betrayal in any dramatic sense, not because of incompatibility. It ended because one person finally stopped performing a role that the other person had never once paused to appreciate. There is a thing that happens to reliable people. The world organizes itself around their reliability so completely that their reliability becomes invisible. It is no longer noticed as a quality. It is simply expected as a constant. And the moment a reliable person withdraws, not dramatically, not vengefully, just quietly, cleanly, finally, the people who depended on that reliability experience it as a betrayal, as a change, as who are you now? When in truth nothing has changed at all. The reliable person has simply stopped performing for an audience that stopped watching. What I missed was not Priya. I need to be accurate about that. What I missed was the version of us that I had been maintaining with my own hands. The dinners, the trips, the easy mornings I had engineered through invisible effort. The life that felt shared, but was largely constructed by one person while the other lived inside it. What I missed was the illusion of partnership. The illusion that my work was seen, was felt, was reciprocated in kind. That illusion had been comfortable. Losing it was not painful so much as it was clarifying. And clarity, even when it arrives late, even when it costs something real, is not a loss. Some people will hear this story and say I was cold, that I was calculating, that a man who uses his professional position, even honestly, even correctly, in the same week his relationship ends, that man is something they don't have comfortable words for. I understand that reading. I don't argue with it. I will only say this. I spent 4 years feeling everything and saying nothing. I translated my feelings into actions. Every dinner, every plan, every quietly solved problem, every morning message she eventually stopped responding to with the same warmth she had at the beginning. I did not run out of feeling. I ran out of places to put it where it would be received. And a man who runs out of places to put his feeling does not explode. He reorganizes. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Not for me, for you. If you have someone in your life who quietly does everything and says nothing, and you tell yourself that's just who they are, that's just how they show up, that's just how things work between you, what exactly are you waiting for before you acknowledge what that costs them? Because here is what I know about people like me. We don't leave loudly. We don't give you a scene you can point to and say that was the moment. We simply reach a point where the math no longer works. And on an ordinary Tuesday, we stop. No announcement. No ceremony. Just gone. And by the time you understand what you had, the reorganization is already complete. How long can someone love you in a language you never bothered to learn? Before you lose the right to be surprised when they stop speaking it?